Deirdre Levy is a third grade special education teacher in Brooklyn. She's worked with Sandra Santos Vizcano, who is believed to be the first public school teacher in New York City to actually die from COVID. And she's kind enough to give us a few minutes. Deirdre, thank you. And I'm curious, as we're going to be getting our audience's reaction in terms of what they feel when it comes to sending their kids, or if they're an educator like yourself or other. What's running through your mind? Because you're going to find out in a few weeks from the city and state if you guys are going back to school as usual. Are you ready for that?
Personally, I feel ready because I am not, my immunity is not compromised, but I worry about my students. I worry about my colleagues. I worry about parents. And even though my own immunity isn't compromised, I think these are big factors that we have to think about because there are children that might be living with their grandparents. There are colleagues that are compromised with their immunity. And then when somebody gets sick, there are going to be a lot of staffing issues. So there are a lot of challenges for the fall. I'm teaching this summer, and I have a great remote learning class, and it's been fun, and I've gotten used to remote learning. So I think that if the mayor in New York City is going to cancel events until September 30th, schools should not be open before that.
For many of us, this is a hypothetical about, well, what happens when the school doors open? Is there a safety risk to you? Unfortunately, you know about this. You lost a friend and a colleague to this. What would you say about that this is real for folks who believe that it's either exaggerated or hyped, or the kids, pose no risk, or they carry no risk? Speak about, obviously, Sandra and the realities that you live with.
Yeah, so my friend, Miss V, she wasn't the only colleague of mine to pass away. Unfortunately, a few days later, one of my former classroom paraprofessionals passed away. And I don't think that this is something that we should just, it's not exaggerated. If there are people that have passed away, as well as other people within the country, this is something that we really need to take seriously, because we do not want any colleague deaths. We do not want any children to pass away from this pandemic. And it's important that we take every precaution we can to ensure that everyone is safe.
To that end, you have a unique classroom in that I think a lot of us tend to think of, well, the biggest issue is, having the kids keep distance and masks, but you have a special ed population, and they've got to have acute needs, I'd imagine. What about the challenges with that? All these factors that we're starting to figure out, like how to get kids to school with the busing to get them there. But even when they get there, not all students have the same needs. Talk about challenges of dealing with a special ed class in the middle of a pandemic.
So I understand that when it comes to a special needs population, there needs to be a more hands-on approach. And during the school year, when we were all at home with remote learning, I did make an effort to visit some of my students who live very close to me. And we took every precaution in terms of social distancing. I even went to one of my students' homes and delivered food with an organization called Project Barcata. And we went to his home and we visited him. And I think on individual circumstances, if there's a teacher that feels comfortable visiting her students or his or her students, then that's up to the teacher's discretion. But if you're going to have children in a building full of 1,000 people or more, you're going to compromise the immunity of a lot of different kids and adults. I have some children that have very compromised immune systems, and I know that they need a lot of intensive help when it comes to supporting their IEP goals. However, I think that it's important to make sure that, number one, they're safe and they're happy, and that can be accomplished with investments in remote learning. And it's also up to the teacher's discretion to have one-on-ones with the student, and depending on how parents feel, because I know a lot of parents are worried about sending their children to school.
So here we are in the middle of July, Deirdre, and you guys are supposed to find out, as I said, in a few weeks. I know faculty lounges are a close-knit community. What do your other teachers think? Do you think you're starting on time? Do you think you're going to be in classes 5 days a week? Do you think you're going to be doing some remote learning, some in class? Do you think you're getting a full school year in? Do you have any idea what this year is going to hold?
So for any school that has a teacher's lounge, that's great for them. I've never been in a teacher's lounge before because the DOE can't afford one. So that's something that we don't have to worry about. However, I know that the chancellor has released some plans for a blended learning model where we would be in school for some of the time. So that way, not every student will be in attendance. Again, however, if the mayor is going to cancel large public events until September 30th, there should be no reason why there should be schools open because there are schools that have over a thousand people and might be even more because there are parents that pick up their children, send them to school. So there could be a lot of people in the building, and what they're proposing right now, it can pose a huge safety risk, but there are also parents that can opt out of sending their children for live instruction and they can choose remote learning.
I've spoken to some teachers, Deirdre, who have said they struggle as to whether or not they're going to retire early. Or some have said younger teachers, they're looking for a different vocation. Others even talking about filling out wills. Again, for you and your fellow teachers, especially given that you've lost more than one colleague to COVID, how much of your future are you sure about as it relates to teaching?
So I know that even before the pandemic, there have been lots of thoughts from my other colleagues as to how our profession isn't respected. And there are different accounts on social media that help teachers transition out of teaching. So unfortunately, this is the sad reality in the United States. In countries that are having full instruction, such as Sweden and Denmark and Germany, those are countries that heavily they fund their schools. And if we want to make a change in the US education system, we need to support our schools and to give our schools proper funding in order for schools to run efficiently.
How about you personally? Have you given any second thoughts to being a teacher? Have you thought about filling out a will much earlier than you ever would have imagined? Have any of these kind of choices or thoughts crossed your mind in the last few months?
I think even before the pandemic, there were different thoughts of mine in regards to other careers such as teaching. And I think that I'm not the only person that feels that way because our occupation isn't respected. Our occupation, basically, what the president and Betsy DeVos have shown is that we're expendable and we're important to restart the economy. But we're more than that. And we have gone to school and taken all these tests to make sure that children are meeting standards and are working with each other in support to build harmony within the schools. So I think that if we want to have more teachers within the system, we really need to start thinking systematically how we can value their work and how we can show that we value their work by funding communities and funding teachers.
Well, Deirdre, you have a very interesting month ahead of you and beyond. I wish you the best and be safe. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you.